Hi everyone, today we're going to be building the Easy Voyager. So this is the second set from the Easy Flight test. So you're going to want to begin by removing the parts that you will use. Now most of the pieces that you will use should just come out in this one foam section. But you're going to want to go ahead and double check on one of the sections that you have because you're going to be needing the motor mounts that will be used later on. So once we have removed the parts, now we begin the construction of the center section. You will need to apply a thin layer of glue to the center section. This will be to hold the section in place. And then just go ahead and remove the excess glue with an extra piece of paper. This is just to, of course, make it look cleaner and remove excess weight. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the paper from the piece. And I made sure to do this before recording, so just go ahead to remove paper from both sides. Next, you will want to apply just a piece of tape to the edges of one face. So now you have applied the tape to both edges on one side of the piece. Just go ahead and remove the excess tape with some scissors or a razor blade. A razor blade would give you more accuracy, but in the case that you have scissors just like I do, it would do the work just fine. So before flipping to the other side and working on it, we want to crease the sections with your fingernails or any object that you have. This will help with the lifting of the lift angle on the opposite side. Once we have flipped the piece, we will go ahead and add the dehedral gauge, and this will give us that lift angle that I was speaking about. You're going to want to cut some pieces of tape in advance just because it is what you're going to be using. So now apply the piece of tape with applying pressure to the centerpiece to avoid affecting the angle. Make sure not to apply pressure to the wing. This will give you a better lift. And make sure to repeat the same process on the other side. So now that you have applied tape to both sides, you're just going to want to make sure to cut off any excess tape on the piece. And once you do this, you should end up with a nice clean piece, and we should be done with this section. So like I said before, now with this piece complete, we move on to the center body. I just went ahead and moved locations here. This would be the centerpiece for the center body that you'll be working with. You want to make sure to apply just a nice thin layer of glue right here in the center section. This will be just to hold the piece together. The section does come separated in this format or this way just because for storaging purposes. And once it's dry, just remove the paper from one side only, so the side that the glue is being applied to join them together. So now we go ahead and move on to start working with the edges. You're going to want to use a sharp tool or such as a razor blade or sandpaper to apply a 45-degree angle to these edges. As you can see here, I tried using the scissors first. They weren't as sharp. It would work best with some sharp scissors or smaller scissors at first. But after working at this for a while, what I would recommend best is to just use some sandpaper or a sharp tool as the razor blade, because it will apply a very nice, thin, and clean 45-degree angle to this section. So once I got most of it, I just glued the edges together, and you're going to want to hold this at a 90-degree angle for a couple minutes, just as long as the glue dries. Just make sure not to bend it or apply too much pressure on it. There is going to be excess glue, so just again, with some extra paper, just go ahead and remove this. Once you have given it a couple minutes, just go ahead and begin working the same process on the other side. Just apply a thin layer of glue, press the pieces together at a 90-degree angle, remove excess glue, and just hold it together for a couple seconds or a couple minutes, depending on the strength of the glue material and of the heat applied. So now that we're done with the centerpiece, we're gonna go ahead and start working on the center section and fuselage. So go ahead and remove the paper on the center section, just like as shown here. You're gonna want to do this very carefully because there are some sections that are very thin, and it could just tear easily one of the corners. Um, but of course, just go ahead and do. It's the same process as previously done before on other sections. Just remove the paper. Now here I accidentally removed one side of the paper of this section. It was supposed to be left on because later on we will work on that piece at the back that will be folded on towards the center section. I was still able to manage. I just bent over the piece and applied a little bit of hot glue to it to apply that bumper towards the front. But yeah, just go ahead and leave that section there, and just go ahead and line them up to see if everything fits and works properly. And now that you're happy with the way things look, just go ahead and apply just a thin layer of hot glue to the perimeter of the section. This is the section that's going to be applied towards the fuselage onto the center section. Like I say, you're going to want to bend over the back, and it will act as a bumper to the front. You're going to want to make sure that all the sections match, because this is where the battery and the electronics will be placed through once you start working with these components. So just go ahead and make sure that everything is aligned perfectly. Like as shown here, I applied just a little bit of hot glue. I arranged everything just to make sure that the electronics were going to be properly placed through these open sections. So now we test fit the other section of the fuselage, and you're gonna wanna remove the paper and just apply it with some hot glue right there to that uh, corner. Like I said, just a little bit of thin layer of hot glue to the perimeter. Hold it for a couple seconds, not too much pressure, of course, and just make sure that everything's aligned properly. So now that we have the center section and our main wing complete, we're gonna go ahead and check the fitment and just apply everything together. Here I just went to go get a couple of some glue because I was starting to run out. But yeah, just go ahead and check the main wing and the fuselage and make sure everything's aligning properly. Apply a thin layer of glue to the fuselage first, because you're gonna want to place the main wing towards applied towards the fuselage. Carefully make sure all the pieces are popping through the fitments, and just hold it together for a couple seconds. So with that piece complete, we go ahead and apply glue to the center, to the main body, and connect it with the main wing and the fuselage. Just go ahead and pop it through carefully, slow. Just you want to make sure not to break this piece off. But of course, in the case that everything does break out, just you're able to place all the pieces back together with some hot glue. So once it's been dry for a bit, just go ahead and apply a thin layer of glue for reinforcement on the edges of the main body connected with the fuselage. Okay, so now we move on to adding the horizontal stabilizers. These are not a bit complicated. You just want to make sure to apply them properly. So it does have a bending area that you want to do. So do not remove one piece of the paper. Just remove the piece of the paper that has the bending applied towards it, because you're going to want to make sure to check the fitment, and you're going to apply just a small amount of pressure towards this section right there, applied to the edges that were lifted at 90 degrees, because this is how you're going to apply the lift angle towards these horizontal stabilizers. So now that we have the proper lift angle, we go ahead and remove the piece of paper of the back section and glue the stabilizer onto the lifted section. This is now you go ahead and remove the paper from the back side. Just be careful. And once again, apply a thin layer of glue to the section that will be mounted on first, and just place the section right there carefully. You want to make sure not to apply some glue to your fingers, because the glue, of course, is a little bit hot. Just be careful. Don't apply too much pressure. You don't want to break those pieces. They are pretty thin. And then you just want to go ahead and remove this. Apply the same process towards the other side. Remove the paper of the section that has the lifted section. Check the fitment, just as such, and then go ahead and check everything's working properly, fitting properly. Apply the tape to see, you can see the lift angle. It's applied to both sides. The paper is just to, I mean, the piece of tape is just to obviously leave the lift angle, and so that we're able to then glue it properly onto the piece. Okay, so now that we have everything here done and complete, we are done with the main section. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to adding the electronics. So the first step is adding the motor mounts. These are placed onto this section just by friction. They will not break off, but this is just to check the fitment. I'm just here cutting a couple pieces of tape just because of the pieces I'm using to apply the motors onto this section. And with the tape, I'm also going to be adding a couple of nuts towards the front section. Now this is to check the center of gravity, because there will be too much lift placed on the front with the electronics as well onto the fuselage. The center of gravity for yours might always be different from the other one, so this is something that you want to check on your own first by gliding. Now we will begin by adding the left and right motors. Now if you look at your glider from the cockpit point of view, this is how you will place the motors left and right. And they are also color coded when it comes to adding them onto the motherboard. So the electronics, I had the electronics already previously built because I used them on the EC Nemesis, so I just went ahead and detached them from there. But I will detach everything because they would have to be passed through the main section of the fuselage where the battery will be mounted and where the electronics will be placed with the control board. Now you're going to want to make sure to tape the motors to the motor mounts. Do not glue them. This will create too much weight onto the motor mounts and the front section as well. And of course, you're going to use these electronics for future gliders, such as the AC Nemesis and the Orbit. Here I just went ahead and disconnected everything from the control board because, as I mentioned before, I had them already connected from using them in the previous glider, the Nemesis. You want to be really careful with these disconnections and connections. If it helps you, use a small tool such as pliers that would help with these connections, because you don't want to break these connections. If not, it will be pretty much impossible to attach them. So then you're going to want to fit the electronics to one side where the control board will be mounted. This is the section where, as you remember, we flipped the piece and it was that was going to act as a front bumper. So that open section is where the control board will be mounted on. It specifies to glue it onto the board, but